Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we are talking getting started with Octopus Deploy. So let's start with a little bit of housekeeping. There'll be no requirement for you to record today's session. We will email you on Friday with a recording of today's session. Also, you can also check it out on our Octopus channel on youtube.com/Octopus Deploy. All your questions, please. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes at the end of today's webinar where I'll be putting your questions to Sarah. So please do use Zoom Q&A. Try and avoid using Zoom chat as we don't always see the questions in there. If you also want to join our Slack, you can join on octopus.com/Slack. We will also be monitoring the webinar channel for questions. You can also jump in there and ask things after the fact. So today I'm joined by the one and only Mrs. Sarah Lean.
Thank you for that introduction, making me feel old by saying Mrs.
Well, it's true, isn't it?
Yep.
So today's your first webinar at Octopus. I know obviously you've done one with Trish, but you're in the hot seat today.
Yes.
How are you feeling about it?
I'm excited because I've been on a journey of learning about Octopus since I joined, so it's nice to be able to share some of that knowledge, hopefully, with our guests today.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to it today, Sarah. At this point, I'm just going to get out your road. I'll let you jump in, and I'm really looking forward to today's session.
Awesome. Thank you, Derek. So as Derek said, we're going to be talking about getting started with Octopus Deploy. So I just wanted to give us a brief overview and make sure we're all on the same page and being able to understand what Octopus Deploy is. Now, if we're oversimplifying what Octopus Deploy does, it's basically a DevOps tool that helps you automate your processes. However, if we dive into some of the detail and some of the features of Octopus Deploy, we can narrow them down to 3 key areas. And those 3 key areas are release management. Now, that's being able to audit and see quite quickly where your environments all live. Is your test environment at the same level as your production environment, or are you out of sync with that and you need to have a look at where you bring your environments up to? Now, the second part is about deployment automation, and that's about automating that release of your software. Now, let's face it, when we build our software, there are different stages that we have to go through. If you're building a .NET application, you may want to build it and restore it and put a bunch of tests through it before it goes through to your environments. And this is where Octopus can help you. It can actually automate that process so that, let's face it, as a human being, if you are working through that checklist, you might miss a few things, whereas Octopus won't miss a few things, and it'll be consistently deploying those steps for your software build across all of your environments. Now, the last area, and this is my favourite area, so it's by no means last on the list, is actually operations runbooks. And that's where you can actually start to do things with your infrastructure, looking at infrastructure as code. So if you're deploying to the cloud nowadays, you may want to deploy using ARM templates or Terraform or something else along those lines. We can do that inside runbooks. And it's not just that infrastructure as code that you can use runbooks for. You can use it for maintenance tasks. I actually saw someone doing something very cool the other day, and this is maybe a complex use case for it, but they had a GitHub repository where someone, one of their customers, had logged an issue inside an issue in GitHub, and then it triggered a runbook inside Octopus Deploy, and it actually restarted their load balancer to try and fix that issue that the end user had reported inside GitHub. So you can have a lot of automation around there to try and deal with your customers as well. Now, where do you host Octopus Deploy? There are 2 options for you, 2 main options, and that's the self-hosted and then the Octopus Deploy cloud option. Now, the self-hosted is all about you having control of Octopus and the environment that it lives in. The hardware, the software, everything from start to finish is completely under your control. Now, the Octopus Cloud deployment is all about having the ability to not worry about what's going on in the back end and you just interacting with Octopus. And that's good for many people. They might want to use everything in the cloud nowadays, so that's a great offering. If you want to try either of these offers, you can use Octopus. You can go to octopus.com and sign up for a 30-day trial of either the self-hosted or the Octopus Cloud environment, and you can have a look at either of those and evaluate them for your use cases. Now, in today's presentation, we're going to be focusing on 2 key areas. We're going to show you how to build your infrastructure using runbooks. And then we're actually going to take an existing application and automate that deployment to Microsoft Azure using Octopus Deploy. Now, the application that we're using is one that we love here at Octopus Deploy, and that's called Octo Pet Shop. And that's focusing on an online retailer for a pet shop. Now, the back-end infrastructure of that is a .NET Core solution with 4 key components. We have the web front end, we have the product service, we have the shopping cart service, and we have a database that this all works together. So I'm going to be talking you through how to automate all of the deployment around all of this. So let's dive into the Octopus Deploy portal and have a look at it now. So this is the Octopus Deploy portal, and whether you're using the self-hosted version or whether you're using the cloud version, this is what you'll get, and you'll interact with the Octopus environment using a web browser. Now, one feature I want to show you about before we get started is the show help or getting help part that's built into our portal. And this helps you find relevant documentation. So if you're new to Octopus or you need a refresher course, you can click on the question mark and have a look at our help. It will show you references about getting started, what is this area, and if you're looking for further resources to help you understand what's going on, there's there as well. And there's also a link at the very bottom to reach out to your support team and ask them for some help if you need it. If you don't need the help section, you can turn it off, and we're going to turn it off today just so as I have more screen space to show you what's happening. Now, the first step within your Octopus environment will be actually setting up your environments. So we've set up some ahead of time today. We've got a test environment and a production environment. Now, this should mirror what you have in your own setup. So if you have a test environment, you have maybe a development environment, maybe a staging environment and a production environment, you would have all of those 4 environments as well. We're keeping it very simple today by just having a test and a production environment. But again, you should be mirroring what you have or what you wish to have here within your environment section. Now, as I said, we're also going to be deploying our infrastructure and our application to Azure. So we need to link our Azure account with Octopus Deploy, and we do that inside the account section here. Now, again, I've pre-done this just to save some time, and so you don't see some of my subscription ID and some of my keys. We have 2 Azure accounts set up. We have the Azure production account, which is associated to our production environment, and then we have a test Azure subscription as well, which we keep separate for our test environment. Now, you could have 1 Azure account here, or you could have more Azure accounts depending on how, again, your setup is. It's not just Azure you can add, so you can add more clouds. We have availability for the AWS cloud to be added, Google Cloud as well, or you can use different ways of adding it. Setting it up is fairly easy, and a lot of this information you get from, say, your Azure subscription or your AWS subscription. You'll start off by giving it a name so that you understand what the account is and what the connection is for. You'll then put in your subscription ID and authentication method, and then you'll put in some more details around the tenant ID, the application ID, and the password key as well. If you're restricting that account you're setting up to a certain environment, you do it at the bottom. And again, we have separate ones for each of this, but again, you can select multiple, or you could leave this blank for yourself. Now that we have our environment set up and we have our connection with Azure set up, what we actually want to do is try and deploy some of our infrastructure, some of our web apps and some of our database servers to the Azure environment through Octopus Deploy. Now, if I head over to projects, I've got an area here called Octo Pet Shop. If I dive in here, we can see we have a menu system down the left-hand side that will give us access to certain features. Now, we've got an overview of our operations runbooks. As you can see, I've already run my runbooks ahead of time, just so that the environments would already be there for us. However, if we go into runbooks, we can have a look at them. Now, I've got 2 runbooks set up. I have my create infrastructure one and destroy infrastructure one. Hopefully by the names, they'll be fairly as simple as to what they actually do. But what they actually do is they deploy our infrastructure. So within Azure, you need a resource group for all your resources to live. And inside that resource group, you're putting an Azure SQL Server, an Azure SQL database, a web app service plan, and then 3 web apps as well. And the destroy one does the exact opposite. It just takes away all of that infrastructure that we've just created if we need to. Now, if we dive into the runbook, here we can see that overview again of my runs having happened. So my test run was successful, and so was my production run as well, which is always a good sign. If we have a look at the process, we can see the steps that are happening inside this runbook to actually create that infrastructure. So we've got 10 steps here that Octopus will run through to create all of that Azure infrastructure that we need for this application. So the first step would be to create that resource group, and then we'll start off with the Azure SQL Server, the database, the web app service plan, and then the web apps. Now, if we dive into one of these steps here, we can have a look at what's actually happening. And what I want to show you really is focusing on how we're deploying that to Azure through Octopus Deploy. And if we click on source code and then edit the source code, those that are familiar with Azure ARM templates or JSON files will recognize this format. It is a good old-fashioned Azure ARM template. There's nothing complex here. We've just taken this Azure ARM template and really pasted it into Octopus Deploy to actually initiate and automate that deployment. Now, you'll notice some of the steps here are actually called Register Product Service Web App. Now, what this stage is actually doing is associating the newly deployed web app that we've just created to Octopus Deploy. And that's telling the environment that this web app now belongs to us and we want to do things with it using Octopus Deploy, whether that be stopping and starting it or potentially deploying our application, which we'll be doing later on in the demo as well. Now, if we quickly go over to our Azure environment, we can see this setup. So we've got those two resource groups. We've got our production one and we've got our test one. And inside it, we have all those resources that we deployed. So our SQL Server, our app service plan, our app web apps, and our SQL database as well. Back inside Octopus, we can actually see that infrastructure reflected here as well. If we go back into infrastructure, and then if we click on our environments, and then go into test, for example, we can see those 3 web apps and our database server all registered within our environment and ready to actually accept deployments to. Now that we've got our infrastructure set up, what we actually want to start doing is deploy that .NET Core application to that infrastructure that we've just created. And how we do that is actually using packages. So we have the .NET Core application all packaged up into 4 different packages. One that configures the database, one that configures the product service, one that configures the shopping cart service, and we have the 4th one which does the web app as well. Now, I've preloaded 3 of them for you, so you didn't have to watch me upload them, but let's upload the last one and show you how easy it can be if you need to upload something into Octopus Deploy. Now, it's as simple as that. It's just a click upload, and then you bring it from your PC or wherever, and you upload it into the library. Now, you probably want to do this in a real-life environment by actually using a CI server, a continuous integration server, where it's building the packages and then pushing them into your Octopus library for use. But again, I'm keeping it simple today to show you the art of the possible. So I've just uploaded those packages straight into Octopus Deploy for you. Now, if you're familiar with .NET and you're used to configuring those kind of applications, you'll be familiar with this file, the appsettings.json file. And don't worry if you're not, I'm not a developer, so this is very new to me as well. However, the appsettings.json file can be used to configure certain elements of your application. You can define variables that you might want to edit depending on the environment you're deploying it to or how you're deploying it to. In this case, we have 4 different variables or settings that we can change within our .NET application during our deployment process. And we can see them here in the last section under App Settings. That's app version, environment name, product service base URL, and the shopping cart base URL as well. We want to configure them during our deployment process. And this is where we actually start to use the thing called variables inside Octopus Deploy. So if we head back into our project, we can have a look at this. Now, I've already pre-populated a lot of variables because I didn't want you to sit there and watch me typing incorrectly, no doubt, during the demo. But you can see here we've got a lot of variables populated depending on our environment. We've already got 3 of the app setting ones here. We've got the app version, the product service-based URL, and the shopping cart-based URL. What I want to do is add in that 4th one for you. So in the name of the variable, we'll do app settings : environment name. And inside the value, we will use an Octopus variable as well. So there are some default Octopus variables built into the program where you can call on them. So this is a built-in one that pulls the environment name. So we can pull in, say, test or production, because that's our 2 environments, and actually use them to configure things that are happening during our deployment. Now, you can scope your variables. You can pick which environments, even target roles, processes, deployment steps. You can get quite granular with your variables. I'm happy to leave this to be used by anything that needs it inside my Octopus project. So I'll add it to the list and click Save. Now, something pretty cool that I think so inside here is you can click on Preview and actually see which variables will be populated and how they'll be populated during your deployment. So we've got the test environment setting here. So what we can see here is that our app settings environment name variable will actually turn into being test, which is exactly what we want it to be. We want to show up inside our application that we're deploying to our test environment. And you can see our URLs will also get populated with that test. And we can see some of the other ones. So there's our Azure resource group. It'd be called Getting Started Test, RG. And if you remember when I showed you our Azure environment, that's exactly the name of our resource group. But you can change this, obviously. You could change it to production and hopefully it will refresh. And there you go. All the variables that will be pulled in during our production deployments will be changed to production or prod. So again, we're able to use those variables to massive effect. Now that we've got all of that set up, we actually want to start to automate our deployment. And to do that, we'll click on Deployments. Now we'll define our deployment process through what's called steps. So if we click on Add a Step, we have a bunch of step templates inside Octopus Deploy. Now these templates are either created by people who work at Octopus or by our community who have built them up and tried to extensify this library. And there should be a step for anything that you need, whether that be deploying to Azure, whether you're deploying to Windows Server, or using things like Docker. So there's a whole host of things that you can do inside Octopus with these step templates. Now, the first one we want to do is deploy a package to configure our database. If we search for package and click on deploy a package, we add that step to our deployment step. Now we call it something that makes sense. So I'm going to say deploy to database. And there's lots of options inside these steps that you can configure. So don't worry about the ones that we're not covering. I'm just going to show you the ones that we are concerned about here. Now, the first one we want to actually make sure we populate and change is the one around targets and roles. Inside Octopus Deploy, we have things called target roles, and those are associated to your web apps, your databases, your server, any kind of infrastructure that you maybe want to configure. This means that this step will only target those servers or web apps or databases that are associated with this tag or target role. In this case, because we're configuring our database, we want to click on Bastion because that's what we've called our database server in here. Next step we want to configure is around the package. Now, as I said earlier, we have 4 different packages, the zip files, to use to configure our application. So we're going to pick on the one that says database because we're configuring our database. Now, that's all we need to do for this step. So we click on Save. Now that we've got the database configured, we can click Add a Step. We want to start to configure the ones for the web apps. So if we click or search for Web Deploy inside it, we can add this step. Now we give it a relevant name. So deploy product service. The first bit that we want to configure is the worker pool. Now, this is something that you don't necessarily need to do, but I'm going to do it because there are a few options available to us here. If you're using the cloud instance of Octopus Deploy, you can use what's called a hosted worker, which will carry out the tasks that you're creating inside these steps to take the load away from the main Octopus instance. We are going to use our own configured Windows server that has all the tools and the connections that we need set up so that that can carry out our steps. Now, again, don't worry about this. This is probably a next step beyond this webinar, talking about worker pools, but we're changing that setting to set our environment up. Now, we also want to set up a target role. So because we're doing our product service, we're going to click on the product service target role. And our package here should be product service. Now, below there are lots of options to configure that Azure Web App, deployment slots, additional files, removing additional files, physical paths. We don't need to take care of any of that because it's all coming from our package. The one thing we do have to configure though, and we have to enable that, is structured variables. I'm also going to tick the .NET variables and transforms as well, just to give us those settings. Now, what this does is add in a few extra things that we can configure. Now, the structured configuration variable bit is where we actually put in our app settings.json pointer. And this should pull in those variables that we created earlier on and configure our web app to pull those variables in and see it. Again, don't worry if you're not familiar with .NET and then that kind of processes. Just trust me that this is the steps that you need to take in order for this to happen. So we want to configure our second web app. So we click on, we search again for that same step. And we're going to call it this time shopping cart. We're going to follow the same process and configure the same parts within our step. So I'm going to click on my Windows worker. The target role this time is going to be the shopping cart. My package is going to be the shopping cart. And I'm going to configure the extra bits that I need as well. So if I scroll back down, I'll put my app settings .json file requirement here as well. What we're also going to change slightly in this step is to actually run it in parallel with the previous step. Configuring these web apps is a fairly trivial task for Octopus, so we can securely run these two steps together so that it kind of speeds up the deployment. Obviously, if you're doing more complex configurations during your steps, you probably want to test whether running tasks or steps in parallel is necessary in your environment and something that actually makes worthwhile. For this case, it absolutely does make it worthwhile for us. Now we're going to configure the last web app. So we search again for our step. And we will call this deploy and web. Again, we'll go through the same process of configuring our worker pool. We'll click our target role as web this time. Package ID will be the web, which is the one I uploaded manually. And then we'll add in the extra features that we need for our app settings file. And again, we'll run this in parallel with the previous step as well. So now we have the deploy to database and we're configuring our 3 web apps. There's one more step that I actually want to add to this process, and that's called the manual intervention step. Now what this step does is actually pause your deployment and then ask for some human interaction to happen. Now this we're going to configure for our production environment only so that there's an extra step in place should someone want to double check the deployment. So say I configured this deployment and kicked it off, but I wanted Derek to double check my work before it actually went out to production. This would happen. I would pass this deployment over to Derek to approve, and he would approve it if he was happy with the work that I'd done, or if he would abort it if he wasn't happy. So this just puts in that extra step to check that you're happy with the deployment happening to your production environment. You necessarily wouldn't want to have it in your development or your test environment, but maybe again you would. What we want to configure is some instructions to that person that would actually be approving or aborting the deployment. So we'll just ask them, do you want to deploy? And make them double check. Again, you would probably put in real life more instructions and more detailed instructions if there was things that they had to check. Now, there's a section here where you can configure inside the step who's responsible for actually approving or denying this deployment process. There are different teams you can set up inside Octopus, or you could set up a custom team for your needs. I'm actually, because this is a demo, I'm just going to select everyone. But again, in real world, you would put in an appropriate team that didn't include everybody in your environment. I only want this to run for my production environment, so I'm going to set it up so that it only happens when we're running to production. And we're going to click Save. Now, if you have a look at my steps, we've got the manual intervention at the very bottom. So that's no good because it will run through all the deployment and then ask me if I wanted to run that deployment. So what we're going to do is reorder these steps by clicking on here. And we can drag and drop these steps in any order. So don't worry if you've created all your steps and then you realise they're in the wrong order. You can reorder them. So we'll click on Save. We now have our process set up to deploy the Octo Pet Shop application. So what we want to do is create a release. So if we click on Create a Release, what this will start to do is pull in all the information that we've given Octopus and get it ready for deployment. Now you'll see it's given it a version name. And because this is the very first time that I have ran this, it's calling it version 0.0.1, which makes sense for us. You could obviously change this depending on what your needs are if you have a different versioning system, and Octopus will carry on that versioning system for you. The next time you deploy it, it'll be 0.0.2 or whatever you're doing. It also has pulled in those 4 packages that we had uploaded. You can see it here. And again, you can configure some of this. It's by default selecting the latest package, but you could have a certain version that you wanted to deploy during this piece. I'm happy with the default, the latest ones, so we're going to click Save and move on with the deployment. This is now the stage where we can actually kick off the deployment, and it's giving you again more information about what's being pulled in and what's happening with this deployment. I'm going to click Deploy to Test and we'll get it pushed out to test. Now, it will take a few minutes for this to go ahead and do it, but if you wanted to watch it or if you wanted to troubleshoot what's going on or just see what's happening, you can click on Task Log here. Now, this will give you some great information about what's happening, again, if you needed to troubleshoot it or if you just wanted to watch it. I know Derek is a massive fan of turning on verbose logging every time, so I'm going to turn that on for him in the background. But you can see it's giving you a mass of information here about what's happening and what each of these steps are actually doing in the background for you. If we have a look, say, at the Deploy to Database one, we can roughly see here it's connecting to our database. It's using the username and password that we'd given it. It's deploying that database information, and it looks like it's been successfully deployed. And it's now working on configuring our web servers as well for us. So that looks like it has completed. So let's double check. Yes, that looks like it's completed. So if we go back into our task log, we should have the URLs for our web servers. Let me find the right one because we've got. So if we click on this, now it will take a few seconds for this to kick off because the Azure web apps are often very slow to start up. They need a wee while to warm up. So let's give it a minute. So we can hear we've got our Octo Pet Shop deployed. Now I want to point out to you that we have used those variables and configured the settings here inside our application. So it says version 0.0.1, which was the release we created, and it's running inside our test environment. So that's pulling in the environment name variable that we set, and it's also pulling in the release name as well. Now what we want to do is actually deploy that to production now that they were happy that it's ran. So if we click deploy to production, it will take in the exact same information and steps that we've used and push that out to our production environment. Now, as you can see, that manual intervention step here has kicked in and really stopped that deployment from happening at the moment. Now, if you were in a real life environment, you would probably at this point get your colleague or another team to have a look at this. But because we're just in a demo scenario, I'm going to assign this to me. And then I get the option of proceeding with the deployment or actually saying, no, it's not going to deploy. So yes, I'm happy. So I'll put in some notes so that we can see that later on. And I'll click proceed. Now this will take a few seconds just to kick in and deploy to production for us, but in the meantime I want to show you other bits inside Octopus Deploy. So if we go into configuration, we can see the audit settings. Now this is great for if you're wanting to understand what's been happening, who's been doing what within your environment, having a look at. You can see all of this information here. We can see that yes, I submitted an interruption to the manual intervention step and added the notes yes to it. So there's lots of information here to track again if you're trying to understand why something happened, who did something. You can have that traceability here as well. Now let's double check if this is run in our production environment and have a look at it. It's still running at the moment. It will take a few minutes to do that, and we can wait to see that running and just keep me honest by showing you the production version of this demo as well. So again, here we have our Octo Pet Shop. It's running version 0.0.1 again, because that's the release that we created. But you can see that it's now running in production. So again, that variable has been changed during that deployment step, and we're now running in production. So we can see that we have that change between the test and the production. And again, we can check that, you know, if we're doing any testing or trying to solve a problem, etc. So we have that configuration within this application as well. So if I move back into my slide deck, we will talk about what we did. So what we did there was we deployed our infrastructure through to Azure using Octopus Runbooks, and then we automated the deployment of our .NET application using Octopus again and pushing that into our Azure infrastructure. Now I've just covered the kind of core features of Octopus Deploy, but there's much more that it can do. Some of the great things that you can do, as I touched on a bit, is you can set up users and teams and various different permission levels, depending on who needs what access and who needs to be able to do what, and maybe who has access only to kick off those production deployments as well. We've also got things like, as I mentioned, workers and execution containers, which can help you if you're using deploying to lots more servers and at a bigger scale. They can definitely help take off that load for you and start to distribute it out depending on your needs as well. If you're also maybe someone who develops SaaS applications, so software as a service, and you have an application like Octo Pet Shop that you deploy to multiple customers, we have a feature inside Octopus Deploy called multi-tenancy, where you can actually set up those deployments, have those different customer environments set up and deployments separated as well to make your life much easier. Now, last but by no means least on this list is a new feature that we've been working on for quite a while here at Octopus called Config as Code, which is basically how you can actually take your deployment step and manage it inside, say, a GitHub repository and control it using that as well. So you can have your deployment processes set up using source control and source versioning as well, just like you do with your application code. So that's in early access for our customers. So definitely check that out if that's something that you would like as well. If you're sitting here really enjoying my demo, and I hope you all are, and you wish to become an Octopus customer, please do reach out to our customer success team. They can be reached out to and they can talk you through the different features. They can give you more details and more demos than I have today, and they can also talk you through some of the licensing involved with Octopus Deploy as well. If you're wanting to learn more, do check out our YouTube channel. We have tons of previous webinars. We have lots of tutorial videos, and I'm sure I'll be putting some more tutorial videos up there as well. So definitely head over to YouTube and do what every good YouTuber will say, like and subscribe to our channel, because we definitely are hoping to build out that platform much more in the coming year. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join me. Hopefully you've enjoyed my demo. Derek, do we have any questions from the audience, or do you have any questions for me?
So yes, Sarah, I do actually have some questions for you.
Cool.
Some things I'd like to understand, and I'm sure it'd be one the people attending today would like to understand. So, can I roll back? And if possible, how do I roll back?
Starting with a complex question there, Derek. Thank you. So yeah, rollback is something that you probably do want to be able to do, because let's face it, if you deploy your code out to your application, maybe your QA servers, and things don't go quite right, you definitely want to roll back that change. We can do that inside Octopus Deploy. So when you saw in my demo, we're talking about the versions and the releases. If you rolled out, say, version 1.1 and things went wrong, what you would go back into is go into your release that's 1.0, and then the button will say redeploy, and you can redeploy that to your environment. Now, that's if your environment is fairly straightforward and simplified. If you're starting to add in a bit more complexity, maybe with your load balancer servers or a database, and you're starting to have to roll back data and change the state of your infrastructure, that gets a bit more complex. And what I would do, what I would actually recommend is you look at a previous webinar that our colleagues Bob and Sean did around rollback strategies, because they covered a lot of the more complex scenarios. So yeah, that's definitely worth watching to answer that question fully. But yeah,
it's a tricky one to get. I've had that question many times. I think once you add a database into it, it becomes a lot more.
Yep.
It's a lot more difficult. If it's just the application, yeah, of course you can roll back. Bringing in data, that one's a toughie.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question. So how does Octopus integrate with my CI server?
Yes, so if you're using a CI server or a continuous integration server, such as Azure DevOps or TFS as it used to be called, maybe still is, depending on what version you're running, or if you're using like TeamCity or Jenkins or even GitHub Actions nowadays, you can actually use that in conjunction with Octopus. We have plugins for some of those CI servers that I've mentioned that can make it really easy for the integration. Equally, for something like GitHub Actions that we're seeing a lot of customers use, you can build your application inside GitHub Actions, storing your code there, and then get GitHub Actions to push your packages straight into Octopus. You set up that authentication and that connection, and it pushes the packages straight into your Octopus server. So yeah, there's lots of integration there with your CI server if you've got one of them existing in your environment.
Awesome. And if it's not one of the supported ones like Jenkins, etc., you can also just use the Octo CLI to create release, etc.
Yes.
Yeah. So how can I do external approvals?
Yes, so you might want to send the approval for, say, the production and deployment out to someone who maybe doesn't sit inside your Octopus environment every day. So you can send off that approval to something like Slack or Microsoft Teams as an example, and they'll get a wee notification inside their environment, and they'll just click on it and it'll approve that deployment for you. Equally, I know Derek has used things like pushing approvals off to emails and things like that. So yeah, there are options where you can actually push that approval to another platform that someone can use and do that approval as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So next question, can I limit which users can deploy certain projects or certain environments?
Yes, absolutely. And this is probably something that you do want to set up inside your real life environment. You want to be able to control who has access to different environments or what they can do depending on their job role. We can do our access based on RBAC, so that role-based access control model, and you can tie it down there. There are a bunch of built-in permissions and teams that we have inside Octopus Deploy that you can use. They might fit your use cases, or you can build your custom ones as well. But we've also integration for like things like Azure Active Directory and things like that. So there's lots of options there for you to I want to say control, but that sounds like the wrong word, Derek. But yeah, you can limit who has access to certain parts inside Octopus.
Yeah, quite often what I see there, Sarah, is developers are allowed to deploy all the way up to the last one in pre-prod, and then someone else, normally operations, who'll do that production deployment. That's actually our most common use scenario. So yeah, that's definitely possible. So next question, what actions are audited and logged by Octopus?
So everything is audited and logged. So whether you're creating a step inside a deployment process, whether you're kicking off a deployment, creating a release, all of that is stored inside Octopus, and you can search back on that. Even if, say, you have a project that you've discontinued, maybe you had an application called Random Quotes Web App, and you discontinued that project and that application from your environment and you deleted it from inside Octopus Deploy, you can still see the audit log from that. So even if you delete a project, there's still that audit log there. So if you get audited or you want to go back and see what someone did and see maybe who deleted that by mistake, then you can actually go back and have a look at it. So there's lots of information there inside our audit trail.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really great. So next question is, can I schedule a deployment to happen in the future?
Yes, absolutely. I think we all want to be able to schedule everything that we can do as much as possible so that we're not sitting here pressing buttons. Yes, you can schedule it. So there is a kind of schedule timer that you can use inside Octopus Deploy for something to be deployed, depending on, when you want to release that. Maybe you have something scaled up for, say, a Black Friday sale event. You've got a special offer that you want to push out to your website. You can trigger that and set that to happen and schedule it. Or you can have like your CI server triggered to build something and then deploy it at a certain time. So there's multiple options there in terms of scheduling. You don't have to sit there and manually press buttons.
You mean I don't need to be up at 3 a.m. anymore to do those deployments?
No, you can schedule them, Derek, and be happy in your bed.
Well, wait a minute, I need to buy this software. So next question. How does Octopus communicate with its deployment targets?
So this will depend on what your deployment target is. If it's a server, we use an agent that uses a port. You can use that on the default port range that we use, or you can specify a different one. If it's something like an Azure resource, say an Azure web app, for example, what it would actually do is use the configuration that you have between Octopus Deploy and your Azure account. So say the service principal authentication method, and it would communicate through that way and just find your targets that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So on to the next question. How are sensitive variables stored?
So they're encrypted at rest in the back end of Octopus Deploy, and we encrypt them using what we call a master key. Now, the master key is spun up when you start your Octopus either self-hosted instance or your cloud instance. And I definitely recommend backing up your master key because it's the key to actually retrieving and storing your sensitive variables. If something goes wrong with your Octopus instance, and you don't have a backup of your master key, then you can't retrieve those sensitive variables. So that's something I learned the hard way about. However, if you don't want to store your sensitive variables inside of Octopus Deploy, you can use something like an Azure Key Vault or an Azure or the AWS KMS, which is the key management service, I believe, Derek, is the name of it. So you can use something external and then pull the variables back in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Last question. What security certifications does Octopus have?
So at the moment, we don't have any. However, I know our security team is working really hard to get us certain certifications that our customers are asking for. And I also know that the answer that we're giving, the no, that we don't have anything at the moment, is quite a concern to a lot of customers. So if that is a concern to you, please reach out to us. We can put you in touch with our security team and they will take you through that process and answer any queries or questions or concerns you have in much more detail and kind of handhold you through that whole process. So yeah, the answer is no at the moment, but we're definitely working on it and we can offer you support where you need it.
Awesome. What I've had in the past is people asking about PCI compliance and things like that. And it's not actually about what Octopus does, it's how you implement it. So that's one of the things that I've been asked in the past around the security side of things. It really is how you set it up. You can have all the security accreditations in the world, but if you don't use, say for instance, an SSL certificate, everything's set in clear text, right?
Yep.
So yeah, awesome. So at this point, I think we're going to head on over and start addressing our the attendees' questions. Okay, Sarah, I hope you're nice and comfortable in the hot seat. Milland is asking, do we have Okta integration with Octopus deployed cloud services?
Yes, we do. We do integrate with Okta. Actually, if you head over to octopus.com/docs and search for Okta, you'll find some great documentation on two sections. Actually, we've got one showing you the high level integration, so where we support it, where we don't support some features, and then there's also a step-by-step guide on how to actually integrate Okta with Octopus Deploy. So yeah, octopus.com/docs, and you should find the relevant information you need over there.
So I think this one is obviously I know that what you've been working on recently, and Martin is asking about it. Do you support bicep templates?
So yes, this is very close to my heart as I have been working on Bicep. We don't have native support for Bicep just yet inside Octopus. However, we can actually deploy the Bicep templates. If you hang on a few weeks, Martin, I will be releasing some blog posts because they are written. They just need to get filtered out. So yeah, we will be covering that, and it is something that we can support. If it's something you're looking at right now and you're wanting to implement in your environment, please do reach out to me and I'm happy to chat through that before the blog posts come out. But yes, ultimately the answer is yes, we can use Bicep within Octopus.
How convenient. Did you actually insert Martin into the webinar, Sarah? That's awesome.
No.
Awesome. A question from Taylor. They don't see runbooks in their project. Is there something that they need to do to turn on runbooks?
So Runbooks came out in version 2020.1. So I would first of all check what version you're running, Taylor, because you do need 2020.1 or above for Runbooks. So I definitely double check your version of Octopus and then take it from there.
Awesome. Anil is asking the demo. Does this work on premise and the cloud version as well?
Yes, so we can support you deploying out to Azure, AWS, GCP, to your on-premise servers. If you're looking to host Octopus, we do have the two options. So we have that cloud version that can run that we host for you, or you can run Octopus in your own data center. So hopefully those answers answer your question.
Awesome. Deb is asking, can they integrate our automated test written in .NET as an Octopus deploy step?
So you could, yes. We do have a range of steps in our community library that could help you do that. We probably generally recommend that you actually do your tests on your CI or continuous integration server, though, before you deploy it out. But yeah, if you want to do it within an Octopus, then we do support it in terms of we have community steps. You may need to start building out custom workers for all the tools that you'll need to do your tests, though. But yeah, we can do that for you. That's not a problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There's a one from Anonymous. Can we get a link to try this demo? I think if you check out our sample, our webinar instance, do you want to go for that?
Yeah, so where you saw me deploying this from is actually publicly available. So it's webinar.octopus.app, and you can actually see all my steps and all my workings there. Equally, if you want to grab the code yourself, we do have it on GitHub. So it's github.com/octopus samples, and it's called the Octo Pet Shop. So we have the code there as well. So you can go and grab it and use it if you want. So yeah.
And there's a 30-day trial as well for cloud
absolutely.
and on premises as well, which is good. So John Brennan, John is asking, hi, have an older version of Octopus running on a TFS server. I'm trying to add a new tentacle and it's saying that the Azure VM extensions are deprecated and suggesting updating to a DSC update. Is there any way I could deploy the tentacle without having to set up a whole ARM template and rebuild my VM? Thank
you. So if you don't want to do the whole rebuilding your ARM template and rebuilding a VM, maybe look at something like Chocolatey, which is a Windows package manager tool that you can use either on your desktops or your servers to install software. And that can help you not only install software, but keep it up to date as well. John, maybe that's an option for you if you don't want to do that. Hopefully that answers your question though, but if not, ask another one.
Also, just a quick one there, John, as well, is you can also, there's some instances of how to call Chocolatey within your script as well when you're provisioning. If you check that out on samples.octopus.app, I'd look for the Azure space or the infrastructure as code space. There's normally some good bits in there as well. Okay, Craig has several questions, so we're going to cut those up into smaller questions.
Okay.
The example shows a runbook in the web UI. How are runbooks versioned? How can changes to runbooks be tracked? And can runbooks be stored in Git?
So at the moment, runbooks are kind of just tracked inside the web UI. We don't track them or store them inside Git. That is something we are hoping to add in the future, though, Craig, because last year, near the tail end of last year, we launched Config as Code, where you can take the deployment steps and have them stored in somewhere like GitHub as code, and then you can version it through that. I'm not sure when we are going to launch similar for the runbooks, but that is something that is on our roadmap.
Hopefully sometime in 2022. Yeah, hopefully. And at the moment as well is you actually have a publishing mechanism as well. So that's something that we rolled out in 2020.5, I think, where we basically you can now publish it. So that's how you can version control that. But yeah, what's the underlying config format for Octopus? From the webinar, it looks like JSON.
So yes, it is mostly JSON, but when we launched Config as Code, we also kind of created, if that's the right word, a language called Octopus Configuration Language, and you can use that's also there as well. Derek, you're probably better answering this because you were here when we were doing that. I wasn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's definitely JSON. Obviously, as we move, most of the configuration is stored in the database. At the moment, as we move over to config as code, and once it's coming out of the beta, what will happen is once you take that and switch it to Git, then yes, it will actually be Octopus configuration language. But OCL is very much it's based on something very similar to HCL. It's very readable, etc. But yeah, so that's it. But at the moment, it's stored in the database as JSON, and then long term, it will likely move to config as code. Question number 4. Are users and teams solely defined in Octopus, or can Octopus work with existing users, groups, and existing directories, such as Google, LDAP, Active Directory, etc.?
So we can do it either way. So you can store the users and groups inside Octopus. You could do it that way. Or you could use your existing provider. So we support Google Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, as I mentioned earlier in someone else's question, Okta. So there's a few other, and there's probably ones I'm not listing there. But yeah, we can absolutely integrate with your existing identity provider and use them as well if you wanted to do that.
Awesome. Last question, Craig, as well, is about Kubernetes. Obviously, Argo CD is tightly integrated with Kubernetes and uses Kubernetes objects CRDs extensively. Is Octopus integrated with the Kubernetes in a similar way, or does Octopus stand separately? At the moment, I believe it stands separately. Obviously, we use a lot of kubectl, etc., but we do have some really great webinars on Kubernetes by Sean Cessna. Check that out on octopus.com, youtube.com/Octopus Deploy, where Sean takes you through all how to use Kubernetes. So you can also check that out on octopus.com/events, and you'll see the Kubernetes webinars there. Okay, last question from Seth. What kind of RBAC do you have around variable sets? Do you want me?
I've never actually tried to lock down our variables with RBAC. How can we do that, Derek?
We can. What we would like to do is it kind of ties in nicely to what you were saying earlier on. What you would probably do is map. Obviously, you would create a group, have that map to your external authentication provider, and then from there, you can actually go in to your permissions and then basically set it up so that, for instance, if you only want people to read them, etc., then that's fine. Obviously, you can lock that down. What again, I would also check out our docs as well, where our permissions, etc., are all detailed. Also, there's a handy little feature that's called test permissions. So you can set it up, with a test user and a test group, etc., and then use our test permissions group, and that should verify that for you, Seth. Okay. Well, that's all the questions, Sarah.
Nice. They were good questions, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Some of the, I think I'd say that's my favourite set of the questions. This is the final run of today's webinar. Okay, so just want to say thank you so much for attending. We hope you learned something cool today. A recording will be emailed to you. That will likely be tomorrow. We are back. I'm back with Sarah again on the 26th and the 27th of January as we talk about getting started with Jenkins Pipeline and Octopus Deploy. And then, Sarah, you're back with Damien Brady at the end of next month. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Damien and I are going to show you how, if you're using GitHub as your code repository, as your version control, how you can actually use it and then GitHub Actions and Octopus Deploy to make everything work together. So CI and CD pipeline all working in harmony together.
Well, thank you for everyone for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, thanks. Bye.